The joysticks in this video have been provided on behalf of Thrustmaster, more information on that later. For many of those on their journey in Star Citizen, a part of that journey involves spending money on PC hardware and peripherals, and there are lots of options out there. One of the most celebrated options for a 6 degrees of freedom situation is the HOSAS, or hands-on stick and stick. 2 joysticks working together to give full and nuanced control over the 6 axes used in spaceflight. But from the more expensive vendors, they often come with a hefty price tag. That's where the Thrustmaster SOL-R comes in, aiming to put the cat amongst the pigeons with a more accessible option. I'm Forrester, and this video will serve as a review of the Thrustmaster SOL-R 2 dual stick options specifically for Star Citizen. At this point, it's important to set expectations. This review will be from the perspective of a gamer, a simmer, a layperson. I'm not a dedicated hardware reviewer, although there are some fantastic channels out there if that's what you're looking for. Instead, this will be from the perspective of somebody who has used sticks on a daily basis for a number of years, but focuses more on the feel of that, rather than the mechanical gubbins inside. Firstly, since this video ticked the sponsored box, it's important to explain what it means for this to be a sponsored video. Whilst no money changed hands to make this video, the dual SOL-R flight sticks were provided free of charge by Thrustmaster. The content of this video is all written by me, and Thrustmaster have no creative control over it, so the thoughts are all my own. Some of the other hardware you see in this video, such as the MonsterTech MTS mounts and Virpil panel, were provided by partners, but as they're not the subject of this video, you can find more information on those on their respective articles on this channel. Further, I have some previous experience with Thrustmaster gear that I've purchased with my own money, including the TPR pedals, T-Flight pedals, and the Warthog series HOTAS. I know that's a lot of disclosure, but I feel it's important that you know where I'm coming from so you can decide if you think I may be biased or not. The Thrustmaster SOL-R 2 is a dual stick setup, and, as the name might suggest, is designed with space sims in mind. SOL-R, Solar. It probably works better in French. Sol-Air, Sol-Air. On each stick base combo there are 44 buttons, 2 triggers, 2 hats, a mini stick and thumb wheel on each stick, and both sticks have a twist axis for 3 movement axes each, or a total of 6, which aligns neatly to the 6 degrees of freedom in space sim movement. Each base connects to the PC via a USB cable, with the bundled cable converting USB-A at the PC side to USB-C on the base. Dual sticks therefore need 2 USB ports. The gimbal on the base uses a Hall effect sensor to determine where the stick is, and there's also a thrust axis on the front of the base. Both sticks in the SOL-R 2 are identical and mirror to allow for left and right placement. On either side of the base at the top are 2 switches for a total of 4 per base. Below those are 4 buttons on either side for a total of 8 per base. On the left below that is a rotary switch with a push button for another 3 inputs, and on the right is a mode selector switch for a total of 4 buttons. At the front is a slider axis labelled thrust, which also denotes 01 or 02 for which base is selected. On the stick, aside from the X and Y axes and twist axis, there are 2 hat switches, a mini stick, and a scroll wheel. The hat switches and thumbstick press in for an extra button click. The left hat registers distinct numbered buttons, and the right hat can either operate as a POV hat or distinct buttons. Then, there are 2 buttons on the face of the stick. On the back side of the grip is a pinky switch and a double-stage trigger and a trigger. Underneath the base is a hard switch which is used to tell the base whether to operate as left or right, which changes the device name in Windows to correspond to what is selected, and also the number 01 or 02 on the front. Sadly, the box for this review sample was badly treated by the Great British Post, so not the prettiest to show on video, but in the box for the R2 were the 2 bases, 2 grips, the removable wrist rests, the thumb rests, 2 USB cables, stability supports, and the usual paperwork. Alternatively to the SOL-R2 model, Thrustmaster also sell a SOL-R1, which is a single stick and base configuration at just over half the price of the R2. Primarily, configuration for each of the R2 sticks and bases is done via the Windows Game Controllers menu, whereby hitting Properties opens up the Thrustmaster configuration window to test all of the buttons and axes and to configure the LEDs. The software is a bit laggy, as software that interfaces directly with hardware can be, and selecting RGB colours using the colour wheel only might not be the best way. It's also a shame that there's no easy way to change whether 01 or 02 illuminates on each base without switching the base between left and right. But aside from updating the firmware and setting RGB colours, the software is such that you probably only visit once during initial setup, so it doesn't impact the day-to-day. The SOL-R is compatible with the Thrustmaster Target software, however, which makes for slightly easier configuration of different presets and bindings, including for Star Citizen. For those that own other Thrustmaster grips, the base is compatible with the Viper and Hornet grips, as shown here with my own F18 grip. After using the sticks for a few weeks, there's a lot to say for the SOL-R2. Despite the Thrustmaster website saying the level is advanced, actually the fairly plug-and-play nature of these sticks made them one of the easiest to set up. The buttons are clearly labelled and numbered, which helps when getting used to the setup, and ergonomically, despite the grips and bases being plastic, they feel comfortable and surprisingly robust. The LED customization is nice, not just to personalise the setup, but also to give visual cues as reminders for how you've set the buttons up. And for a game like Star Citizen, which has the potential to bind a lot of controls, there are more than enough buttons and axes to be able to set a huge number of those keybinds to suit personal preference. The stick bounces back to center quickly and with very little wobble afterwards. The expected price for the dual stick box is around $400, meaning that the R2 isn't cheap, but is one of the cheapest dual stick options out there. Reflecting on my personal hardware journey, this would probably be an intermediate step, representing an improvement from the entry-level sticks as a competitor to the Logitech X56, for example. There are, however, some downsides. Because the stick always recenters itself after pressure is released, throttle movement can be a lot of work if not using cruise control in Star Citizen. The grip is also always face up as a regular joystick, rather than side-mounted like an Omni throttle or Verbal Z extension. There's no dust protector where the gimbal connects to the grip, and the overall construction is predominantly plastic, rather than some of the metal construction on higher-end sticks. All of that said, the SOL-R2 is at a much more accessible price point for many, and whilst not cheap, it does offer a dual stick setup, tailored for a space sim environment, for less of an upfront investment. That's especially true for somebody potentially building up their hardware one stick at a time. Reflecting on my personal journey, I went from a cheap stick to an X55 to a Warthog to Verbal controls. Had the SOL-R2 been available, I would have chosen it over the X55 for Star Citizen. In terms of setting keybinds for Star Citizen, Thrustmaster offers a suggested configuration which is shown on screen. It can be easily configured through the Target software. For me personally, after experimenting with different configurations, I ended up only using 2 axes on each stick and continuing to use my Thrustmaster rudder pedals, muscle memory and all that. The left stick operates the strafe for forward and back, with the right stick controlling pitch and roll. The thumb wheel on the right stick gives an axis for strafing up or down. On the right stick, buttons 30 to 34 are used for target management, to lock targets and switch between previous next targets. The 2 triggers have a total of 4 buttons which are used to fire different weapons groups, and buttons 40 to 44 are used to change between operator modes. Button 39 operates a scan ping, whilst button 35 fires missiles. Then the pinky switch toggles between coupled and decoupled flight. On the left stick, button 17 toggles the headlights, and buttons 5, 6, 7 and 8 switch engines and power on and off. The LEDs are colour coded to make clear which is which. The thrust slider controls mining laser intensity, and the main trigger is for boost, with decoys on the top trigger and noise on the pinky button. Buttons 30 to 34 control how many missiles are selected and of which type, and pushing button 11 toggles master modes, with 9 and 10 changing which mode is active. These controls barely scratch the surface of what's possible, not even using half of what's available, showing just how customizable hardware is these days. But control settings are a deeply personal choice in my mind, so having the flexibility to set in a way that suits you can't be underestimated. At the risk of going on for too long, that just about wraps up for this one. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, subscribe if you'd like to see more hardware videos in future, and I look forward to reading your thoughts in the video comments. Thank you again to Thrustmaster for sending out this review sample. It's nice to experiment with more of these hardware type videos. And thank you for watching.